Please. Well, yeah, so there's a lot going on. One of the things that I know I wanted to say in this recording, because I guess I've been saying that for a long time. You know, these forays, I believe the word is, into the fray of social media and mainstream society, living my life and being on public record, as well as the AI data bank, you know. Yeah, like I said, I'm always aware of all of the above, you know, and it says with all that intention that doing all of this from the beginning, like everything I did. It's the second thing I'll mention, you know, regionally, locally speaking, you know, took a symbolic ride around the two homes, which was raised in Deep East, aka Southeast Detroit, and Southwest Detroit, you know. There's a lot in that as well, pretty emotional, a lot of reflection in this transition of the age and eon, and like a lot of things, just like culminations, you know. There's been a lot of that going on, man, you know, metamorphoses and such, you know, conversing with spirit and counsel and talking about, you know, stages of the caterpillar, then the cocoon, and then the butterfly. It's like, bro, it doesn't go in reverse. It's the direction it goes in, you know, a completely different being from that point. And, you know, what we concluded with that, you know, especially teaching it to humans and other new creations, it's like, bro, if that type of dynamic metamorphosis happens to a little singular creature like a caterpillar and a butterfly, what type of metamorphosis do planets go through as they continue on in experiences in existence, you know? And that's, you know, one of the foundational things, you know, the transition that's happening. So that's in alignment with the culminations, as our boy Brave Ben from the Suspicious Observers so brilliantly recapped in a nice 15-minute video I believe I shared, you know, tying it all together, you know, and it just makes logical sense. And when you can conclude that, that's when it opens the door for you to co-create with it. Again, only based on the state of being you're in. We just happen to be human, you know. So yeah, there's a lot in that. What else? So yeah, man, a lot going on thing. Like I said, it's perfect that I started there, you know. Because like I said, in summation, you know, and obviously when I say a lot, it's that, you know, it's like from the cosmos to the microbes, as I used to always say, you know. And just unconsciously and now super consciously aware of it all and just fascinated by it, you know, constant state of gratitude and fascination. That's why I can keep going, you know, even in the face of apparent limitations physically and my status in society I was born in, you know, and all the things going on around me, you know. always been the foundation of my being, is that, again, higher truth of all things, like I said, once you understand it, you're able to engage it more, and that's what a lot of the galactics and primordials are saying about me, it's that, bro, you mastered this plane and this dimension. You're a child. It's one of the reasons why you're so detached and disinterested and distant, We've always been on this, and that's always the purpose, is being aware of and then eventually engaging with higher states of being, because that ensures that awareness and those portals, remain in this plane, density, sectors of society, regressing nature and existence, this type of connection with this type of individuals, and when we form unions and collectives, that's how things remain, open, So, that being the theme, that's what I be meaning when I say it's a lot going on. It's like I said, especially the work that I do, that stuff is protected by law, policy, HIPAA, and all that other stuff. So I'm going to be talking about that, and that's the bulk of my life. That's where so many, workplace connections and relationships, and people be close to you like family, because like I said, you're going through so much and can't really say it to nobody except your therapist. And some of us don't have or need therapy, but still have to connect, So that's the other thing, especially now, with so much going on. Talk more about that tree of love, because there's so much going on with the culmination surrounding that and them, And like I said, especially now, where literally, bro, I remember was writing a song, I think something like, the last of the love songs, or the death of love, like that, because I've been tracking that, how, we grew up old 90s R&B, love song singing ass, and that was evolved from the classic 80s and 70s, great music from that era, but the theme was real love. And even though for me, which again is a foundational reason why there's always this distance between, my root lovers, my beautiful branches, and the leaves, the lovely leaves that I've had in this tree of love. That's always the reason, and again, for those 30 years, that's what they've always said about me. That's the singular thing, even though they don't know each other or of each other clearly. They always talk about, how distant I can get, and how cold it can be, how direct I am about what I'm doing and what I'm not doing, how I feel, how I don't feel, And yeah, man, it's a big part of that, but like I said, at the core of it is my connection to spirit and my path and calling towards God. And bro, like I said, quiet as kept, I've been working it my whole life, So, and they all knew that to a degree. That's why, love was always there, even though we couldn't share lives and such. Love is like only you've grown, but again, that's how I teach it, what I'm doing, marriage, family counseling, working with singles, sex education, intimate partner stuff, It's a very different thing between spending time with someone versus sharing your life with them, and even the biological origin of wanting to procreate always being at the heart of it. Our psychological and sociological impulses are just as much a part of our being as our body, That's kind of what drives our body, for better or for worse, So that's one of the reasons why, again, things have gone the way they've gone, you know. But talking about it, I know one of the things we just agreed on is to start talking about, you know, because one thing I say with the tree of love is that, um, like I said, every last one of them from 10 to 42, it's been a supernatural and paranormal foundation to it. And again, it's just some deep stuff. I won't get into the cosmic stuff related to why we're bonded, you know, the way we're bonded, you know, and the experiences we've had. But I will say that it's one of the reasons why I can be, you know, single and with no children, but still rest, you know, knowing what I've experienced and why, you know, and whatever comes forward, you know, this is my foundation. So, like I said, the one story, I guess I'll just start. That's why it's so young. Like I said, at 10, my very first love. Again, it's a very long story. So I'll just talk about, you know, the kind of supernatural, paranormal elements to them, you know. And so like for her, it's funny because I said it was at my grandma's church, you know, east side of the city. And I was a very young guy in elementary school. But again, I've always been tapped in, connected. And like I said, quite literally, like I said, at my grandma's church, there was the sanctuary on one side, and then on the other side, it was called the other side. And that's where, you know, we would do community stuff and snack and kitchen and fellowship, you know, but the sanctuary is sacred. So it's a separate space. And in the church, you know, there was this pillars, stone pillars that were openings, and again, take a standard door size, at least in America, standard width of a door, and I was on this side where the choir stand and the pulpit is, and she's coming down from the choir stand and then crossing through the length of that door, and I'm standing there and I just looked at her. And from the span of that door, it's like everything we would ever experience happened. And I seen it and I felt it. And all I knew in that moment as a little guy is I have to be around her. And I can imagine being that young, I'd beeline toward her and probably just awkwardly and weirdly stood there. Just being in her presence. I can imagine that's how it went, you know. And like I said, from then on, like I said, again, pretty much we were young, and, you know, she became a member of our extended community, you know, from the church and the families that raised me, and again, some long stories. But like I said, between me and her, like I said, I started obviously as nothing, nobody, and eventually we became friends, and eventually we were best friends. Then gradually became lovers, and then into my early adulthood, because she was like 3 or 4 years older than me. It's another theme of my life, you know. It's just tough, bro. And like I said, the origin and wrap up the story, it ultimately ended up, because again, she had children by other men, and again, there was one question of paternity, but trust me, if it was mine, she would have known, because the issue was, you know, she wanted us to move in together. She wanted us to be together. And again, I was in my early 20s, and, you know, I'd grown an iron spine with my soft heart from the heartbreak she took me through, and, you know, a couple of other leaves and branches I had growing up, you know. And I just was like, no, bro. It's like, there's no way that's going to happen kind of deal. And I just could never anticipate. I know she loved me. I knew I loved her, but I could not anticipate the impact that rejection had on her. Because like I said, she had rejected me my whole life. And like I said, that was the biggest part of my story and why I'm so strong. And why my experiences with women come with this, you know, boundaries. Because like I said, my first love, which is her first love was my first cousin. and it wasn't just any first cousin. We grew up like brothers, in my grandma's house, especially during those formative years of 0 to 7. So it was never ever any love lost between me and my cousin slash brother. But man, that was a unbelievable dynamic, and I learned so much, you know. But at that time, we was always together and coming back to each other, this, that, and the third, and we talked as best we could about it. But I respected where she was coming from about what she would say about him, because that's what I was going through with her. You know what I'm saying? But she, like me, were always mature beyond our years. But we've been through some of the trauma. Some we knew, others we didn't. Like I said, she'd just been abused so much. It was another thing. The women in my life, and like I said, starting with her, that's what every last one of them I experienced and told me consistently and in their own ways, is that you are my first or only true love. I've never known love until I loved you. You know what I'm saying? And again, it's some powerful shit. And like I said, with the powers of persuasion, it's also a lot of responsibility. And it's why I'm so disciplined, especially with my sexual desires. I know what it's like to be faithful, but I also know what it's like to not answer to anybody, but to respect what's going on, who I'm with or who you with, this, that, and the third, So, yeah, I told her no, like I said, we talked later that evening, and she's crying, bro. I mean, she's just devastated and hurt and rejected and all of that. And she's like, Chris, I love you. You understand? I love you. She's like, other than my children, you're the most important thing in my life. And like I said, bro, the desperation, it was just so powerful. And I still had to tell her no. And like I said, we talked about it, obviously, in a few years after that. I was like, yeah, girl, I couldn't trust you. And she was like, you're right. But she knew, like I knew, how ferociously protective I am of children, how well I parent children, and that was the thing. And what I never told her, like I said in the video before, about, her hoeing days, at least being it's difference between promiscuous and hoeing. I take that shit very seriously. But, she was a promiscuous teenager, like a lot of them where I come from. But it was never a big deal to us. Like recreational sex and sex for commerce is what we grew up around. Sex for bonding or intentional laying down to make kids. It's dwindling. We ought to take care of them when they come. But, that was never a big deal for us. And relationships and bonds and family and culture, it's much different than that, and that wasn't the only kind of relationship. That's why, a certain title in one of my chapters of my book, talks about that aspect, of how it's like a small town, So, yeah, rejected her, and then I moved on. And like I said, if I would have said yes and we would have started that dynamic, no, we'd probably still be together. We'd probably still be together, probably had children of our own, or it would have turned into that dynamic where she like my bottom B, you know what I'm saying? And, that would have been, our household and, establishing other things with the lifestyle we live, I'm more organized with things. But, again, I was always on a higher path, on a spiritual path. So, yeah, that was my foundation. And for better or for worse, every love that I've had on this tree since then, you can owe that to her. Because she grew me up, So I know the two other stories I want to tell are tied together. Again, they're all individual in their own way. They all have a piece of my heart. I'm like young maestro out here, saying Barry White looking ass, got so much love to give, That's just part of it, and again, naturally, especially socially speaking, just something else they would always say. It's like, yeah, bro, so yeah, you're my only love kind of deal, but you're like that with all these women. If you think I am kind of deal. Like my second ex-wife said, he was in the bed one time, mad as hell, he was talking about it, so fuck, I am, nigga, some crash test dummy. for your real wife to come through. It's like she's bacon with it. But no, but it's like it's real though, you know. It is what it is. So, but again, especially the supernatural, paranormal origins. Like I said, bro, I just always follow the signs. I ain't never been on no stalkerish kind of shit. Everybody know that. Nigga, I would be on my own tip. And like with my first wife, you know, we talked about kind of ruled it at the beginning with her. Let her know, like, bro, it ain't that deep. It'll never be that deep. I ain't on that shit. You be in my whole world, this, that, and the third. Like, bro, I'm out here in the cosmos. The expanse of eternity, you know, never mind what's going on down here on the ground, geopolitically, black national, white war, and all that shit. Come on now. It's a lot in it. You know, I love this, that, and the third, but we down here on the ground, bro, you know. So it's on some heat kind of shit. You know, so that together with the spiritual stuff is why I'm able to go through all of this, but still not, you know, again, succumb to what a lot of people succumb to in the face of these kind of powerful relationships and, you know, enmeshment, as we would say, in the psychological sciences, you know, attachment theory and all that, you know. So, yeah. But two beautiful branches I had, so international women, you know what I'm saying, descended down around city, man, you know. And Spirit called me to them, you know. And like I said, I've been in and out and around the industry for a while at that point, because that's just one of the structures beyond the glass lens, you know what I'm saying, that mainstream stuff from LA to New York and all that. You know, in between you got these regional sets, you know what I'm saying, these cities and such, you know. And when the A to the B down through to the D and the F list come through, you always have providers, you know, for every vice that they would like, you know. And that's just what time it is. And down around city, man, you know, especially just international borders and the Great Lakes, come on now. That's how I call it, the organized crime capital of the world, bro. And it's always going on, you know. So, yeah, you know, it was down around city. And, you know, Spirit had called me there, so I was on another tip, you know what I'm saying? I was sucker for love ass looking ass, you know. And the first beautiful branch is the one I talked about, that Princess Angel. Like I said, she changed my life. I talked about that in the what is that, the capstone course at 23 minutes exactly. The capstone course of my CCH approach. Yeah, so that story, like I said, bro, is long. It's a lot in it, but like I said, and I also recorded, I was debating posting it. I told the story to Birdie, who was an old friend of mine. It's a long story there as well, but you know, I was telling her I happened to record it and talked about it in detail, you know, all the supernatural, paranormal omens, pretty much, the foreshadowing, the precognition of, you know, they're coming kind of deal, and you got to be there, you got to be ready. And like I said, the long short of it, you know, yeah, bro, it's deep, bro. I'm telling you, bro, it's a lot in this, bro. Come on now. So, both of these women are artists, you know, and they did artistry for a living. One of them is still active. The other, you know, got in and got out. But again, these are like real strong, deep, mature women. You know, that really, like I said, like my first, they grew me up, and that's why I tell all of them when we were connected and talking, you know, for those seasons and those cycles, like, yeah, bro, y'all got me from there to here. It's like, mama, y'all got me from there to here. If I didn't have you in my life in the way that I did, even for those seasons, or that one season, bro, I probably wouldn't have made it, you know. And like I said, the angel, she descended for one day and never seen her again. But like I said, bro, both of them, the unique stuff about it is they literally wrote about the encounter before it happened. You know, and like I said, bro, this is documented stuff. This is the reason why Illuminati's be buzzing around and have been all this time, because like I said, they can't afford to lose control of the narratives and reveal too much of our connection to spirit, all of us, you know. So we've been battling in and out all this time, but that's one of the stuff that even they can't deny, bro. Like, yeah, bro, there's a lot in it. So just like a nation with powerful standing armies and economic resources and all that, bro, you don't want to get down with them like that. So we might as well come to some commission type stuff and work together kind of deal, you know. So it been like that. But, you know, the reason we got together, you know, all of the reasons were fulfilled pretty much. So we just kind of respected and backed off. So again, I will want to say their names, and if and when it's time to do that, like I said, I'll point it all out. Like I said, bro, I do conferences and stuff, develop programming. I can point that stuff out, both qualitative and quantitative, mixed methods kind of presentation on the truth of it all, you know. But again, out of respect to them, I only respect to them because I'm not only an open book. This is my contribution. You know what I'm saying? Like we call it from way back in the day, Starseed Disclosure. You know, and we all out here and activated, and you know, like Wisdom of Ages videos I like to watch. We are the vanguard. You know, rolling out the rainbow carpet for the divine spirit. You know, the Zen. We're just aspects of it. You know, that was the mission was about, and that's probably as far as I'll go as to why, you know, why we, the connections were the way they were, you know. So like I said, it's just so beautiful. It was a lovely thing to experience. And the first one is just amazing because like I said, she, literally the song that she led with is what we experienced that night. She talked all about it. So, you know, when she got on stage after we had talked the first time and fell, you know, and she's, you know, picked me out of the crowd, make sure I could see just B-boys playing like, bro, ain't this a B? That's right. Living it right now kind of deal. So when we finished the night talking, you know, shoulder to shoulder, almost merging and melting into each other, it was like, bro, that was kind of the foundation. And, you know, we talked, because like I said, she's from another country, bro. So we briefly talked, you know, after that online for a bit, you know, but she acknowledged that she was in a relationship, you know what I'm saying? And that shit was beautiful and profound, but, you know, she was committed, you know, and there's a lot in it, you know, it's in completely different spaces in our life, but, you know, it was so strong, and obviously the supernatural and paranormal stuff, but, you know, it was a lot in it, and I always wished her well, especially, you know, like I said, just like with my woman I call my first fiance, who was also, you know, a part of that lifestyle. You know, it's like her artistry before we met was kind of like a foreshadowing of what could be and what's coming. And then the artistry after we met was all about what we experienced, you know what I'm saying, together and apart, you know. And again, it's so profound and it's had such an incredible impact that, you know, it's one of the reasons I am the way I am. And like I said, it can't just be no ordinary love. Kind of, you know, having Photoshop singing as you know, it's almost like why there's such things as arranging weddings and marriages and stuff like that when you're at this level of energy, you know, and cultures and genetic transmission is a reflection of that. You know, and that's why the Indian caste system is the way it is, because it's built on the metaphysics of the spirit and the soul, you know. And that don't go away just because psychological sciences and ideological subversion try to regress the human. That's still the ecological template of all things, you know. So that's one of the reasons why I've experienced what I've experienced, and why, again, socially I'm single and no children, but quantumly and primordially I've been merged in several unions and collectives. That's just part of it. That's kind of what I mean when I say councils and courts, light and shadow, you know. So yeah. So the next one again, she's also an international woman. Just absolutely incredible. This one happened, you know, with the first Beautiful Branch story I just told. That one lasted for about, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, all the way up to the moment it happened. Heck yeah, bro. This is coming, get ready to go. And me saying, no, bro. I'm not. All the way up until I went down there. But this other one, it wasn't such resistance. It wasn't such resistance because it happened so fast. So this was a couple years after that, maybe 3 or 4 to be exact. And like I said, the Detroit International Jazz Festival is always a hit, always has been. You know, jazz music is always my favorite music since childhood, and now specifically smooth jazz, you know. So, yeah. And in some cases, you know, it's a family event, you know, especially with mama, you know, siblings, extended family, you know, we would meet up down there or get together at a house and mob down there, you know. And it's always a great time, you know, down around city, man, you know. And this time, you know, it was a weekend and me, mama, and my grandma was going. But we was going to tomorrow, I think it was like maybe a Sunday after church. You know, then something came up at church and it was like, yeah, I ain't gonna be able to go, this, that, and the third. And this was the Saturday. Oh, no. I'm gonna get up and go now then. It was like, all right, you know, good time. So I go down there dolo as me, you know, always dolo, you know, to a degree. So I go down there around the time again, not planned at all. I'm down there hanging out, you know what I'm saying? And had an ice cream urge, so, you know, got me a waffle cone with the chocolate soft serve, quite delicious, you know. And I'm just walking, looking at the program, like, okay, where I'm gonna go, who I'm gonna see. And as I'm going through the pamphlet eating my ice cream, I saw her eyes first. You know, I just looked in her eyes, was like, oh my goodness, I guess I'm going here. And I got to reading a little bit, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, oh, so I start to saying, like, okay, let me see them here. And of course, I'm heading in the direction, and I happen to walk right past the stage. She just started her set. And it's like, okay, yeah, kind of caught eyes again. Because, like, yeah, relatively big dude walking around. So when I come glancing, she kind of saw me, and I'm like, hey, you know, I went and sat down, eating my ice cream, quite enjoying myself. And it's great music, great set, you know. And again, it's literally kind of vibing, you know. Moments together kind of deal, because I can't help but move when I hear music. That's how inclined I am. I remember I told that story in my middle school, you know, musician came through, and that was kind of like his deal, because he knew, like, I'm going to play a little ditty, and 1 or 2 of the kids going to get to tapping innately. And that's how I'm going to start introducing the power of music. And that was me, and he pointed me out. And I kind of remember, like, yep. So whenever I hear music, especially music I like, I'm moving, you know. So I'm kind of dancing, you know, almost moments dancing with her and singing with her kind of deal. It was dope. And when the supernatural, paranormal stuff picked up a little more, it's like there was 2 moments that I peeped, like, bro, it was one song she was singing. It was like, it's a song about birds, you know, seagulls, literally. And bro, it was absolutely incredible. It was like Birdie and them knew that was their anthem. They knew that was their song because, like I said, we're downtown in the city. and these seagulls was just swaying all around the stage, and she was singing the song. It was absolutely incredible, and I had peeped that. And then there's another song about a train, you know, kind of nice rhythm and all of that. And I swear, a couple times, but definitely at the end, bro, the Doppler effect. It was incredible. Where, you know, the song finished right as our train, we call it the People Mover. It was such a big deal, especially when that thing was built. There's a lot in the People Mover, but, you know, right as the song was ending, the train was going by. I was like, it was dope. And it was like the whole crowd reacted to both of those moments. So, like I said, the energy was just buzzing around the place. So again, bro, like I said, bro, come on now. I'm usually super confident, even though, like I said, I was a big guy, I've been big since the second grade. You know, I've always been super confident, especially when I know kind of deal. But in that moment, bro, I froze. So like I said, bro, come on now. You know I was going to step to her. You know I was going to talk to her. Come on now. That's basic stuff. We're not talking about culture or even industry versus this, that, third. We're talking about human beings, you know. So you know I was going to step to her. So I got in the line, you know, bought the CD for her to sign. And again, bro, lock those eyes again. It's just overwhelming, bro. Eye contact was overwhelming. And I slid up in front of her and just froze, bro. I was like, my name's Christopher. We're set. And she's like, okay, Christopher. And there was this pause, like, okay, bro, let's talk kind of deal. What are you doing? Let's talk. But something else was about to happen. Something else was forming. And I walked away without saying another word. I couldn't believe it. And I just knew I was going to have a great time downtown city on a Saturday night at the jazz festival. But bro, I got back in my car. I got back in my car, went back home, bro. Got in front of my trusty video game back then, playing 2K. And I put that album on, bro. I put the album right on. It was a classic. And again, I'm trying to reveal her name, but I have to say the songs, just like the Seagull and the L Train, bro. When I got home and put on that album, the first song was called Here Is Everything. And bro, the second song was called The Wrong Goodbye. The Wrong Goodbye. And bro, I peeped that immediately and instantly. And again, the song is kind of like a movie, and she's describing a scene, a scenario in a bar, this, that, and the third. But the theme and the connection between the man and the woman and the song's theme is like, bro, all of this shit going on, one thing do not do, don't leave me with the wrong goodbye. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me, because that's what just happened. I froze up and left her with the wrong goodbye. And again, even beyond that moment, that album's still a classic. Like, so I love music so much. That's how I define a classic, just like a classic movie. It's like, bro, what defines a classic for me is one thing, is when you watch it or you start listening to it, and then when it ends, the very first thing you want to do is start it again and watch it again. And that's what I did, bro. And it's like, again, that started, again, it was just similar to the first Beautiful Branch I talked about, like I said, because it's international women. So they, especially a place like City, man, you know, we got it going on from this, that, and the third, but we far from the glitz and glamour when it comes to that. That's why downtown now is so separated from the city I'm from, you hear me? And I know, you know. So we briefly connected off and on online, and, you know, this quiet acknowledgement, and bro, like I had told her once, bro, it's like I saw it, bro. I saw it quantumly, bro, where I didn't leave her with the wrong goodbye, and I was me the way I'm me around women kind of deal, you know, and we kind of stepped to a cafe right there, and we sat by the window at the two-seater small table, and we talked, and we fell deeper in love kind of deal. And it was like, I saw that, and I think that's one of the reasons why it didn't happen, because I've gone through so much after that. And there's a reason why, with that powerful part of the story, there's still just branches in my tree of love, you know. I have 5 root loves that, again, the first love, I consider, then I had 2 ex-fiancés and 2 ex-wives, you know. So like I said, bro, those experiences, man, it's pretty powerful stuff. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. And if and when I talk about any more experiences, because, again, I'm not just breathing it out because I'm putting this stuff in the public sphere. It's like, obviously, I wanted to have an impact. I want to inspire people, especially lovers and all that twin flame, soulmate, essence twins, all that other stuff. That stuff is real, but you have to know the truth of what it's based on, what it is and what it's not. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, I've had experiences throughout my life that, you know, helped to fill in some of those gaps. And, you know, the most important thing is I always say, because this is at 40 minutes, bro, so I'm going to wrap this up. Hell, it's like a session. But yeah, bro, the reality is, it's like, this stuff is really going on, and it's still going on. But just like the Great Rectification and the Grand Reunification, and what gave birth to life as we know in all things, it is when the divine masculine and the divine feminine merge. That's what gives birth to action, material, to children. You know, that is what it's metaphysically based on. You know, so that's why that's what it takes to procreate. And yes, there have been different evolutionary fractals that have branched off from this process, but that's why it's cosmically quarantined the way it is, you know, and it's separated the way it is. So that's another reason why, you know, I had to experience life the way I experienced it, and all of these women helped me along that path, because the truth of the matter is, externally speaking, yes, you can have, these powerful connections, experience, like old Lady Tina Marie was saying, suspended animation. That's a real thing, when you're so deep in love and that physically close to somebody and you're touching and bonding, it's so powerful that you can be literally coast and seas away and still be connected like that, even though it doesn't compare biologically. But that's a real thing. So, again, that's a reflection of what happens internally, is what I'm getting at. So just like the hemisync, where the left brain and the right brain are working in unison, that is another physical reflection of the truth of the masculine and feminine, the electrical and the magnetic merging to create new existence, So that's what this was all about. That's the story that I'm telling. And again, this is the first public matter I've gone this deep, so it's symbolic for a reason, and I'm glad this little quiet YouTube corner, I've merged them all here kind of deal. And I was going to say this, because I said at the beginning, shout out to my 16 subscribers. And I was like, bro, listen, that's kind of a big deal to me, you know what I'm saying? Like 16 people, like, yeah, bro, let's see what this bro talking about. Even if I'm one of them pages where, kind of obscure or this, that, and the third, but I know like a few of them are, those I know and are connected to me, But yeah, bro, I'm going to keep doing this kind of deal and, build it up, and muse like this, and, may even get into, private pay services from this, because like I said, I still do the spiritual counseling and all that, supporting this ground process, because it's a lot in it, and especially the career job I got now, you know, like a woman I briefly connected with recently, you know, who's gone this path of starting in, you know, above ground ivory tower post-secondary education and state institutional schools, to doing more private sector and merging the metaphysical gift she has with the psychological foundation or education and stuff. And you know, Lord have mercy, with everything going on now, it's like I almost really need to do that. So this is kind of like a practice run for that as well. So yeah, bro, it's 45 minutes. Yeah. So yeah, bro, post this, run it back, and I might talk a little more again about this tree of love since I opened it up. But again, as it comes, that's how I go.